Saint Bernadette's body was removed from its grave and declared to be incorruptible, the term used to describe a body that has resisted decay. The case of Saint Bernadette intrigues the world. Her story is riddled with secrets and mystery. A mystery that now brings modern science to the altars of Europe. Bernadette Soubirous was a young peasant girl who lived in Lourdes in France. She had her first vision of the Virgin Mary when she was just 14 years old. The visions continued, and soon Bernadette left her family to join the convent in Nevers, the very place where her body lies today. The gentle nun, plagued by ill health throughout her life, was an inspiration to all. Long before the Catholic Church officially canonized her, all who knew Bernadette considered her a saint. Saint Bernadette died at the age of 35 and was buried in 1879. On the path to becoming a saint, the Catholic Church called for her corpse to be dug up 3 times for inspection. Doctors, priests, and respected members of the community were witness to each of her exhumations. The body of Bernadette of Soubirous was declared to be incorrupt, as she had escaped the natural laws of decay. But Saint Bernadette is not the only incorruptible. From graves throughout Europe, holy bodies have been exhumed by the Church and found to be in a similar state. Few appear as outwardly perfect as Saint Bernadette, yet fresh from the grave, their bodies too were whole and intact, apparently resistant to the decay reserved for ordinary humans. Why do the bodies of Saint Bernadette and those incorruptibles like her remain untouched by time? And how has their flesh defied the laws of nature? The Catholic Church defines the incorruptibles as bodies that are found lifelike, soft and supple. They remain free of decay, some for centuries, despite circumstances which normally cause decomposition. Some incorruptibles are said to contain clear flowing oils, perspiration, or blood, years after death. They are never embalmed or treated in any way. For millions of believers, the incorruptibles are miracles, often said to possess supernatural power. The faithful flock to the altars where they lie, guarded and protected. It is only a select few who have ever been permitted to examine these saintly bodies outside of their caskets. Dealing with the dead is Jacqueline Taylor's profession. She is professor of funeral service education at Mount Ida College, just outside Boston, Massachusetts, and is regarded as an international leader in the art of body restoration and preservation.
In my study of the incorruptibles, one of the most fascinating, perhaps the most fascinating, is Saint Bernadette. She appears so lifelike. She is the best preserved of the incorruptibles.
Paolo Boschetti is a young chemist in Pavia in Italy. He has agreed to do some on-the-ground research for Jacqueline and to get as close to the incorruptibles as he possibly can.
I'm curious. In my opinion, incorruptibles are not miracles. It would be interesting.
Paolo is part of CICAP, the Italian Committee for the Investigation of Claims on the Paranormal, and together with his mentor, Luigi Garloschelli, an infamous Italian organic chemist, has investigated many supposed miracles, something that doesn't make him popular with some of the faithful. At Jackie's request, over the next month, Paolo will be viewing and photographing 6 incorruptible bodies, each with a fascinating story of their own. Paolo's journey begins with a visit to the most famous of them all, Saint Bernadette. Each of Saint Bernadette's exhumations, all accounts mention that her body was remarkably well preserved, in spite of the fact that the rosary she was holding had rusted. According to the laws of science, after 126 years, a body should be nothing more than a skeleton. As a human heart stops beating and blood flow halts, cells inside the body become starved of oxygen and begin to die within minutes. The rate at which a corpse decomposes is greatly affected by environmental conditions, but the body has usually started to decay considerably within days. Microorganisms contained in the intestines start to break down the abdomen from the inside, while bacteria called Clostridia and coliforms plague the rest of the body. A decomposing corpse will often turn green with the release of substances and gases which may bloat and blister the skin, starting with the stomach. Within a few weeks, hair and nails become detached as a result of the decay, and after a month or so, the tissues of the body liquefy. After a year, all that is usually left is the skeleton and teeth, with only traces of tissue clinging to the bones. A visit to Saint Bernadette is a holy pilgrimage. Thousands travel to this tiny town in central France, all to witness her perfection and to pray at her altar for miracles of their own, granted by the goodness of Saint Bernadette. Usually, no one is permitted to cross the security barrier. Paolo views the saint privately to examine her closely and to take photographs.
St. Bernadette clearly is in pristine condition. I can see where visiting her shrine is a very powerful and moving experience for the believers.
She's wonderful.
Paolo's encounter with this incorruptible will be the first of many in the weeks to come. Will this sleeping beauty reveal her secrets, or are there mysteries that live beyond the grave? Incorruptible bodies inhabit churches throughout Europe, but none appear to be as perfect as Saint Bernadette. She died more than a century ago. Have these holy corpses defied the laws of nature? Or can scientists like Jacqueline Taylor and Paolo Boschetti provide answers to an ancient mystery? Paolo believes in logical explanations and takes his work very seriously. Although he has seen Saint Bernadette for himself, he is keen to meet someone who has examined an incorruptible body scientifically. Genoa is one of Italy's most famous ports. It is here that Professor Ezio Fulcheri one of the world's leading mummy experts, has, at the request of the Church, identified and analyzed holy bodies on their path to sainthood. Before a person is canonized, a Vatican group known as the Congregation for the Causes of the Saints examines each case, exhumes the body, identifies it, and records its state of preservation. This is where Professor Fulcheri steps in. He has studied several holy bodies. Among them, Don Orione. Don Luigi Orione lived between 1872 and 1940. He was a preacher, a confessor, and tireless missionary. At just 21, he started a boarding school for destitute boys. Throughout his life, he traveled across the globe, bringing hope and the word of God to the poor. His legacy lives on in communities around the world, where he and his followers have built countless schools and shelters for the suffering and abandoned. He died in 1940 and was first exhumed in 1965. His body was in remarkable condition. After 2.5 decades, there is no sign of putrefaction, no smell of decay. His hair, nails, and skin dry but perfectly whole. As in other cases of incorruptibility, his internal organs were also intact. His heart was removed and sent back to his most beloved country, Argentina.
Many refer to me as the doctor of the saints. The body of Don Orione was preserved totally naturally, without any treatment.
Don Orione's state of preservation came as a surprise for even the skeptics. He'd never been embalmed. Professor Fulcheri believes that Don Orione's seemingly miraculous preservation is actually a fine example of a fascinating but apparently natural phenomenon.
The mummification was perfect. The body was perfectly preserved. The hair, the nails.
Fulcheri believes that Don Orione became dehydrated and therefore preserved, not a miracle, but in his opinion, a natural process.
Mummification is just one of the transformative processes of the body.
While the body was exhumed in perfect condition, experts believed it would deteriorate once exposed to the environment outside of the grave. The Church asked Fulcheri to use his scientific knowledge in reconditioning the body to maintain its remarkable state of preservation for years to come. Burial conditions can affect decomposition considerably. Water and heat speed up the process of putrefaction. Cool, dry, airless environments can aid preservation and lead to natural mummification. Don Orione was buried in a cool, dry environment, a sealed casket in an underground crypt. Conditions that would certainly retard decomposition. But not all incorruptibles are so easily explained. Even Fulcheri has encountered cases that have seemingly defied the laws of science. The body of Beata Margherita may look weathered, but she is centuries old. After just 1 year, a corpse is usually reduced to not much more than a skeleton. She died in 1464, over 540 years ago. Beata Margherita was buried alongside several other bodies, all in identical conditions in a damp crypt. The other bodies decomposed totally. She remained intact.
There was great water filtration and the ground was particularly favorable to the decay of the body. Whilst the other bodies undertook the natural process of decay, Blessed Margarita remained unaltered. For a Christian, it will remain a miracle, and for a non-believer, a natural event without an explanation.
In 2001, when Beata Margarita was removed from her glass casket, even her incorruptibility could not protect her from a modern environment. Her flesh began to show signs of environmental damage. In order to retard any further decomposition and to repair the damage already done, Professor Fulchiri and his esteemed colleague, Dr. Nazareno Gabrielli, former director of the Cabinet of Scientific Research of the Vatican Museum, joined the scientific commission charged with the task of using modern science to preserve an ancient miracle. After a year of work, her body was laid to rest once more in the convent that is her home. This time, her casket is no longer a simple glass container, but a specially engineered nitrogen-filled case.
Beata Margarita was reportedly found in a very moist environment. Moisture is the enemy of preservation, and that is generally true, except when it's not. It seems quite remarkable that Beata Margarita was as well preserved as she was. There are definitely a number of things here that are simply inexplicable.
Many skeptics believe that the incorruptibles were secretly embalmed. But according to Paolo, fewer than 5% of the 23 incorruptibles he has studied have shown any signs of being embalmed. Arterial embalming was developed over the 17th and 18th centuries. Hundreds of years after the death of incorruptibles like Beata Margarita. Today, embalming is taught by professionals like Jacqueline. It's a modern science that has found a valuable place in a world often shrouded with fear and mystery.
There's a psychological phenomenon that happens when someone dies. Our relationship with them doesn't end, it changes. Embalming gives people time, gives the survivors time to gather. And when I say time, I'm not talking about forever necessarily. We don't know, again, how long embalming might last.
Even modern embalming is filled with its own mysteries. It's a sophisticated science, one that Jackie has taught for many years. She's allowed our cameras a rare and graphic opportunity to witness a modern embalming, not for the faint-hearted.
What we talk about in class a lot is giving this person back their final dignity. And so we spend a lot of time giving this person their final bath, really. Next thing we do is make an incision to access the arterial system. We're going to go in to the incision and bring up the artery and the vein. Then we're going to use an injection cannula, and we insert that into the artery.
An embalming fluid today is both a disinfectant and a preservative. It is injected into the circulatory system of the body while the blood is forced out. Approximately 11 liters of fluid is used in an average embalming. Throughout civilization, it's a sacred obligation to take care of the dead.
Whether we preserve the dead to keep them in a visible state like the incorruptibles, or whether we buried them, it's really out of respect for those people who have died that we take care of the dead.
Paolo believed that in some cases, members of the church may have secretly embalmed a holy body. We know that burial conditions affect human decay, with heat and moisture increasing the rate. But not all incorruptible bodies were embalmed or buried in stable conditions. Paolo has also discovered another factor that could keep a body fresh.
There's a phenomenon that happens during the decomposition process that's called saponification. And it is literally the conversion of body fats to what is known as grave wax. It's a waxy, dense substance.
Simply put, the body fat is converted to a type of soap, giving the flesh a fresh plumpness. Could saponification be a major factor in the apparent miraculous preservation of another incorruptible, Blessed Teresa?
This is the new one. Okay.
Paolo is on his way to the picturesque town of Cascia to investigate. Blessed Teresa devoted her life to educating the orphan girls of Cascia, whom she called her little bees. Suffering through diabetes, asthma, and cancer, she was an endless inspiration to her community. She died in 1947, and her body was exhumed 50 years later, remarkably intact. Although experts glazed her skin in 1998, there was absolutely no reconstruction. Her skin appeared pink and firm, and her body had hardly changed, a factor that Jackie attributes to saponification.
In the case of Beate Teresa, what she weighed when she died, in the scientific study of her body, she still weighs thereabouts. In spontaneous mummification, one might expect that there would be considerable weight loss. However, in the case of saponification, we're simply converting a solid substance to another solid substance.
Saponification has its own mysteries. Scientists know very little about what actually triggers the transformation of body fat into a soap-like substance. It's thought to be a combination of chemistry and location.
The interesting part about saponification is it doesn't always happen. It's a combination of intrinsic and extrinsic factors of the body.
In the basilica above Blessed Teresa, in the very same church of Cascia, lies yet another incorruptible, Saint Rita. A gentle nun who exhibited stigmatic wounds in life. She died over 500 years ago. When her coffin was opened, instead of dust, witnesses found flesh and bone. Subsequent scientific analysis revealed that Saint Rita had been embalmed. But Saint Rita's incorruptibility goes beyond her seemingly remarkable physical state. It is claimed by believers that when her grave was opened, instead of the smell of rotting flesh, witnesses smelled jasmine and roses. Even today, the people working in the church claim to not only smell sweet perfumes when near St. Rita's casket, but also to have witnessed miracles in her presence. The sweet smells surrounding the saint may be from flower extracts used in the burial process. If saponification took place, perhaps the layer of soapy fat, saponified flesh, became infused with the floral scents. The cool, dry, airtight vault of Don Orione, as well as saponification in the case of Blessed Teresa, could account for apparent incorruptibility. But how did the body of Beata Margherita survive a watery grave?
Do you believe the things you read about in fairy tales? Maybe you should. Welcome to the magical world of Mother Nature. Come with us as National Geographic gives you exclusive access to places you never imagined could exist on Earth. Places so extraordinary you won't believe your eyes. Nat Geo Expeditions, tonight at 10 on the National Geographic Channel.
I'm making this a competition.
The best in television.
If you got it, you got it.
Every night. From 8 p.m.
This year is about me. I wanted to prove to myself that I could actually do this.
And the winner is...
You're in competition with nobody but yourself.
This is Star World, the home of idols.
A series so controversial, we can't talk about it or show you too much. And we're only permitted to show it at midnight. Inside Drugs, brand new, Monday, January 24th on the National Geographic Channel. In a state where 6 in 10 are armed,
22 copy.
keeping the peace is dicey business.
Get on the ground. Now!
But if these men can brave Alaskan sub-zero conditions,
I wanted to work for the best.
they can do anything.
Very thankful that we have people to do this for us.
The first defense of the last frontier.
It's your last warning.
Alaska State Troopers, brand new, Monday, January 17th on Nat Geo.
Italy is home to some of the finest examples of seemingly miraculous body preservation, saints known as the Incorruptibles. Paolo's next stop is Lucca, where he hopes to see the body of Saint Zita, an incorruptible famous throughout Italy. Zita lived and died in the 13th century. Her body spent hundreds of years in a burial vault. More than 700 years after her death, she was found to be whole and intact. According to natural laws of decay, she should be nothing more than fragments of bone and dust. Instead, her skin still clings to her bones. Scientists were permitted to conduct a full evaluation of the saint's body in the 1980s. After examining her ancient remains, they discovered that the patron saint of domestic workers showed no trace of any embalming agents. She still had all her internal organs, and there were no incisions anywhere on her body.
This says that when the body was found, it was incorrupt, not embalmed.
Saint Zita appears to have escaped decay without any human help. While the case of Saint Zita is seen as miraculous by many, there are stories of body preservation in Europe with fascinating scientific explanations. St. Peter's Cathedral is situated in the town of Bremen in Germany and has intrigued pilgrims and scientists for centuries. Legend has it that in the 15th century, an artisan fell from the cathedral tower and died. He was placed in a coffin and put into the cellar. He was forgotten. Years went by. During this time, his body did not decompose, an event that was hailed as a miracle by many of the faithful. Over the next 350 years, other bodies were brought to the vault. Some the subjects of experiments in understanding the mysterious mummification. To this day, they lodge permanently in elaborate graves in the crypt, their bodies perfectly mummified. Is the representative for the Catholic Church in Bremen and an expert on the history of the Bremen mummies. Intrigued by the crypt and its contents, scientists throughout the 20th century have formulated theories of their own. Is the crypt radioactive? Or did the lead once stored in the basement retard decomposition? The answer is neither. Once again, the environment played its part. A dry, underground space and cold winter winds through broken windows made for ideal conditions for natural mummification. Many people visiting the crypt would like to believe that it has inexplicable powers, but natural science has provided the answer.
This place is absolutely dry, is the reason for the mummification. There is no secrecy. The human body is drying out, nothing more.
Paolo decides to go on a detour of his own. He has discovered that closer to home, the story of the crypt of Ferentino in Italy is equally as intriguing. Ferentino is a tiny Umbrian town perched on the side of a rocky mountain. At this simple church, there is an important function every year, a celebration of the dead. The village honors the ancient residents who died here and can now be viewed in the crypt. Never before filmed for broadcast outside of Italy, these mummies are more than 200 years old. Many still have hair, skin, and even clothing intact. The local church claims that none of these extraordinary bodies were ever embalmed, and that they were all buried in simple wooden coffins in this eerie, skull-lined basement.
This is a very well-preserved head, better than an Egyptian mummy. With the eyes, the nose.
When the mummies were discovered, the strange properties of the crypt led many to believe that this particular soil was holy. Apparently, the mayor of Ferentino offered burial in the area to the famous and illustrious. Each of these eerie occupants of the crypt has an intriguing story to tell. These Chinese pilgrims died of cholera, caught on a trip to Rome in the 18th century. This child supposedly died of natural causes, and yet his hands are bound tightly together. This man mysteriously fell from a bell tower. and for some unknown reason was autopsied. Here lies a mother and her child, both of whom died as the mother was giving birth. This man was a lawyer who was murdered in a fight with a friend. Paolo believes that the earth inside the crypt is rich in sodium and potassium, chemicals that help absorb water from the bodies, bringing their moisture to the surface. Perhaps the warm, dry winds that are characteristic of the area gently blew across the bodies, removing the moisture and preventing decay.
As I can feel in this moment, there is a wonderful dry wind coming from the windows that's perfect to take away the humidity from this room.
The result? Perhaps the most well-preserved mummies in Italy, without a hint of human intervention. This is also the area where some of Italy's finest salamis are produced. Sausage that is dried completely naturally. Modern science has shed light on the Ferentino mystery, but natural mummification does not appear to provide explanations for all of the incorruptibles. Many questions still remain unanswered. After all, Saint Bernadette does not appear to be a dried-out mummy, nor bloated and soapy from saponification. Perhaps further investigation into her story will reveal more. While scientists continue to speculate, the Sleeping Beauty lies peacefully in her coffin of glass and gold. Her secrets hidden behind the serene smile. A smile that has been maintained for over 126 years. Her body is the vital connection between the past and the present. A role model and a reminder of all things good and gentle.
I think that conserving the incorruptibles is very important for people to whom they are endeared. When someone dear dies, we are reluctant to give them up. People go to cemeteries to visit the graves of people they can't even see. So for someone for whom that's important, how much better would it be that they can actually have that experience of seeing this saint and having that connection? This is really all about connections.
But the secrets of Saint Bernadette go beyond her seemingly perfect exterior. Jacqueline has asked Paolo to find out what lies buried in the written records. While some parts of the story provide answers, there are still many mysteries surrounding the Sleeping Beauty. At each of her 3 exhumations, all reports declared that her body was in a perfect state of preservation. The hands which were crossed on her breast were perfectly preserved. There was no smell of putrefaction. Doctors concluded that the body of Bernadette was intact. Her perfect hands held a rosary which had become rusty, and the crucifix which lay upon her breast was coated with verdigris. If the crucifix she was holding was covered in verdigris, air and moisture had certainly entered the coffin. Why then did her body not decompose? Saint Bernadette's beauty connects millions of believers with their faith. Her appearance of perfection is seen as miraculous, although scientists have their own ideas.
I think that there has been some form of wax restoration. It probably would have had to have been a casting or an extremely talented sculptor.
Is what we see today in Nevers the actual skin of Bernadette, or a wax casting? A casting is not necessarily an artistic interpretation, but an exact replica, complete with the finest of wrinkles and skin textures.
I think that what is visible of St. Bernadette now is probably cast wax, in other words, a death mask.
As Paolo looks deeper into the archives, he finds a particularly intriguing passage. One that explains that an imprint of the saint's face was made at her third exhumation, and that a light wax mask based on these imprints was created. It appears as though Jackie is correct. Although the secret to her youthful complexion may be unveiled, there are still elements of St. Bernadette's incorruptibility that will forever remain a secret. Most astonishing of all, a doctor present at the third exhumation reported that St. Bernadette's skeleton was in a perfect state of preservation and that her muscles were supple and firm. The liver was soft and was astonishingly almost normal in consistency. He remarked that this did not seem to be a natural phenomenon. For this there appears to be no scientific explanation. It is perfectly conceivable that the faithful would view this incredible preservation as a holy miracle. There appears to be no scientific explanation. When science doesn't have the answers, it seems that faith steps in. Does Saint Bernadette hold secrets we do not know? And has her body defied some of the laws of natural science? Paolo's investigations into the phenomenon of the incorruptibles are almost over. Based on his meeting with Professor Faqira, Paolo believes many of the incorruptibles are in fact natural mummies. This would certainly seem to be the case with Don Orione, the priest who was exhumed after more than 2 decades and was perfectly intact. She should have no flesh at all. For a year, all that is usually left on a corpse buried in moist conditions are the bones and teeth, with only traces of tissue. The excellent condition of Beata Margherita's corpse after 500 years is extremely difficult to explain. It is not difficult to understand why believers see her incorruptibility as miraculous. Saint Zita also appears to be a case of natural mummification, although there are certain factors that are difficult to explain. Her body is over 700 years old. It appears as though she had not been embalmed or restored in any way. No trace of any embalming agent could be found after extensive scientific testing. And then there is Saint Bernadette, who connects believers with faith itself. Saint Bernadette was found to be incorrupt. Her well-preserved features were covered with a thin layer of wax, but many elements of her incorruptibility cannot be explained. At her third exhumation, her body, especially her skeleton, muscles and liver, were found to be in a perfect state of preservation, an inexplicable phenomenon. It is estimated that there are dozens of incorruptibles. They attract pilgrims from around the world. The faithful who are inspired and comforted by the stories of their lives and now find peace in their presence after death.
For the believers to have the place that they can go and the place that they can have this connection with someone that means so much in their faith tradition could mean everything to them.
In recent years, the Church has welcomed the world of science into the realm of the saints and is eager to preserve these bodies that mean so much. Many questions have been answered, but science does not offer solutions to all the mysteries.
Some of the conclusions we may draw, they are just maybes. There are aspects of the incorruptibles that are simply inexplicable.
The incorruptibles are ancient and revered. They bring hope. Their physical state inspires myth, legend, and spiritual belief. The incorruptibles are silent witness to a world where faith and science are the guardians of the altars of Europe.